Thank you, choir. Let's give them one more round of applause. In February of 2017, we invited a gentleman named David Rendal, an alumnus of Judson University, to join us for a very important dinner. We had our trustees, we had our major donors, we had people of influence in the room. And David walks out and proceeds to share a story, the first 8.5 minutes of his presentation, about how a 6'6" man faces challenges when going to certain restrooms. My first thought was, I'm in the third year of a 3-year contract. When he finished, though, we all, and especially me, had a deeper understanding how God has uniquely created each and every one of us and why that is so incredibly important. Over the last 15 years, and including that time speaking at that trustee event and speaking at pastoral conferences Justin has sponsored and being a part of the chapel presentation, David Rendal has spoken to audiences on every inhabited continent. His clients include the U.S. Air Force, the Australian government, Fortune 500 companies such as Microsoft and AT&T, United Health Group, Fannie Mae, and State Farm Insurance. Before becoming a speaker, he was a leadership professor and a stand-up comedian. And as a professor, I often feel like I should be a stand-up comedian, but sometimes students don't laugh at my jokes. Dave is far more successful. He also managed nonprofit enterprises that employed people with disabilities. In between presentations, he competes in ultramarathons and Ironman triathlons. He is the author of 4 books. You may pick up a theme here: Pink Goldfish, The 4 Factors of Effective Leadership, The Freak Factor, and The Freak Factor for Kids. David earned a Doctor of Management degree in Organizational Leadership, as well as a graduate degree in psychology. He is a graduate of Judson University from 1995, and he is the 2017 Distinguished Alumni Award winner. David's wife, Stephanie, graduated from Judson in 1996, and together they have 3 daughters. Please welcome back to campus Judson University alumnus, Dr. David Rendal.
So the first thing people want to know when they meet me is, how tall are you? The answer to that is I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels. And one of the problems with growing up tall and growing up poor, I grew up in a trailer park in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When you grow up tall and you grow up poor, you grow up faster than your family's ability to get you pants. So I always had high water pants or floods. They never made it all the way down to the floor, and the kids at school would tease me, hurt my feelings. My mom knew they were teasing me, hurting my feelings. She wanted me to feel better. She told me they were capri pants and they were coming back in style. It turned out not to be true. I'm 6'6". My wife, Stephanie, who I met here at Judson College, is just 5'3". It's okay, like, she's not dying or anything. She's just smaller. Just smaller. You guys like groaned like I said she had cancer. She's all right. But I'm 6'6", she's 5'3", and as you responded, people are like, how does that work, right? And what I like to tell people is that in our relationship, deodorant is far more important than breath mints. So I want to do a little activity here about big and small, right? I want to do an activity about big and small. And so Gillian has agreed to be small. So if you can stand up. Just for today, it's just for this once. And I need another volunteer. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to ask my man here, 3N, property of the athletic department. Are you willing to come on up? I'm not going to embarrass you or humiliate you or anything like that. All right. Yeah. What's your name?
Ryan.
Ryan, nice to meet you. If you just want to go over there on the other side there. So Ryan is... As you can see, Ryan and I are very similar, right? Ryan and I are very similar. So when I graduated high school, came here to Judson College, the reason I had a basketball scholarship at Judson College is because nobody else would give me one. Because when I graduated high school, I was 6'4", 145, okay? the body of a JV girls basketball player, right? So this is who I wish I could be, right? This is who I wish I could be, right? So we got Ryan. Can we agree Ryan's big? How tall are you, Ryan?
Like 6'4",
6'4", yeah, 6'4", 6'5". We have similar chest, and I've never felt so small. All right, and how much do you weigh? How much do you weigh?
Like 250.
Just like 250, yeah. I weigh like 180. So all right, so we got big, small. Are we clear? All right, we're clear. All right, so what I didn't tell you is we're going to fight. Okay, we're going to fight. So a lot of people don't know Founders Day always includes one fight to the death on stage. It's a Hunger Games thing we do. A lot of you've missed them. You should come to Founders Day Chapel. You missed it. That's why you get double credit, because you watch someone die, and that's traumatic. All right, so we got big, small. So what I want you to think about is, I know Judson doesn't condone gambling, but I want you to think about who you're putting your money on so far. We're not all the way there, though, right? We're not already there. So we got big, right? Big. We got small. We got small. All right. We need another thing, though. We need strong. Weak, maybe. Yeah. Comparatively speaking, and only in the physical sense, not like mentally or emotionally, but just physically. I'm willing to admit. Well, fine. Forget the weak, right? Weak, right? Like, this isn't personal. This is just honesty, right? This is just okay. So you feeling good about who you're going with? Who you're going with in this fight? Okay, but we're going to keep going. We're going to make some changes. All right, so hold on. All right. We don't want him to get hurt. I mean, Gillian's rough, right? So we don't want him to get hurt. So now he's a little more protected. She's got a pantsuit, but that's not going to help her. That's not going to help her. What you don't know is Ryan, right? Ryan's done a lot of taekwondo, right? Taekwondo. You're on the football team, right? Am I making that assumption?
I play
Tennis, yeah, good. So you know how to swing stuff, right? Yeah. So again, we don't want Gillian to take advantage of him, so we want to make sure he's ready to go. So he's big and strong, protected and experienced. She's small and weak and exposed. And she doesn't have she told me earlier, not a lot of fights. She hasn't been in a lot of fights, okay? Raise your hand if you're betting on Gillian here, right? You are stupid people, okay? Raise your hand if you're smart and you're going with Ryan, right? Okay. Now, wow, that's a rough group, right? Right, all right. Thank you. That's all I needed. That's all I needed from you two. All right. Now, if you were betting on Gillian, I want you to hand me $20 a person because you're terrible at this, okay? You were going with your emotions, you weren't thinking clearly, right? But some of you might have seen where we're going with this, and you all know this story, right? You all know this story because this is the story of David and Goliath, right? And I wanted to do it physically because I think you went to Sunday school, maybe. You went to Christian school, maybe. You go to Christian school now, whether you're willing to admit it or not, right? So you've heard this, and you've been to church, and you forget, right? But you also haven't heard the story probably the way I'm going to tell it today, because it's not the way that most people tell it, right? So here's David. He's this small, weak, exposed, inexperienced. He's a child, right? He's a child. And he's going to go up against Goliath. This is a warrior who's been trained to do this for his entire life. And not only that, but David lived in a world in which it was good to be the oldest and it was bad to be the youngest. So when God sent Samuel to David's family to find the next king, Samuel started with the oldest and the biggest and the strongest and the most experienced. And God said, no. And he went to the next one, no. And the next one, and the next one, the next one. And then they ran out. That's how unimportant David was. They ran out of kids. And Samuel's like, isn't there another one? And they're like, yes, just the worst one, right? Just the youngest one, just literally insignificant in their world, right? And here's what 1 Samuel says. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or his height. I think we should judge people by height. That's one thing. Like sometimes the Bible's wrong, but it's weird growing up as David and Goliath. You get that? Like it's a weird thing, right? So For don't judge by his appearance or height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. You've heard that before, right? You've heard that before. But here's how I want you to hear it today, right? God sees strength where other people see weakness, right? God sees strength where other people see weakness, right? Goliath was huge, right? Goliath was huge, and he had armor and weapons, or at least a baseball helmet and a bat, right? He was huge. There was not a single person in that environment who looked at this and thought it was even fair. In fact, if I would have stepped back and said, it's time to fight, some of you literally would have just looked away, right? This is not going to be good, right? This is going to be horrifying, right? And that's why I wanted to put two human beings up here so you could feel it. And those human beings were far closer in size than David and Goliath. So let's remember what that was like. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out over the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. Right? I'm 9 feet tall right now, right, from the floor. Right? 9 feet. Right? That's enormous. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. That's some of you. He wore some of you, right? And that's just one of the things he had. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. His shaft of his spear was heavy and thick as a weaver's beam. Now, we don't weave, so that doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'll give you an analogy here in a second. Tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. How many of you have ever gone bowling? Right? What kind of ball am I trying to pick when I go bowling? That pink 6-pounder, right? But my fingers are too big, but that's all that this can handle, right? That's all I've got, like Ryan's doing the 15-pounder, right? 15-pounder, but it's on the end of a spear, right? Imagine on the end of a long beam, 15 pounds at the end, right? That's what he's carrying, right? His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield, 15 pounds. That's a 7-month-old baby, right? That's the size that we're talking about here, right? He's gigantic, and everything he has is gigantic. Everything he has is powerful. Everything he has is devastating, right? What did David have? Not much, right? David hadn't been in fights. David wasn't a warrior. David was a shepherd with a slingshot. David had no experience in battle, and Goliath was full-time professional soldier, right? This isn't looking good, right? This isn't looking good, and no one looking at it sees this going in any other way other than Goliath wins and David loses. Let's keep going. Don't be ridiculous, Saul replied. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and win. Awesome encouragement from the king of Israel right there. You do not got this, right? You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth, right? He's been doing this for longer than you've been alive, right? And David didn't wear anything to protect himself. Goliath had armor that weighed as much as some of you. David had nothing, right? They tried to give him armor. Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, took a step or two to see what it was like, for he'd never worn such things before. I can't go in these, he protested to Saul. I'm not used to them, so he took them off again. Right? Goliath is protected. Even if David does hit him with something, he's pretty much covered head to toe. Right? There's no way to get through, and David's walking out there completely exposed, unable to protect himself. Now, we all know how this story ends, and that's where you're getting tripped up. You're like, yeah, and then God gave David the victory, right? But here's what I want you to think about, and maybe nobody's said it this way before. God didn't shoot a lightning bolt down and vaporize Goliath. Right? God didn't magically make David an even bigger giant or turn him into some kind of velociraptor or do some kind of weird thing to make him bigger and stronger. God actually didn't change David at all. The only thing that God did was God saw what no one else could see, was that Dave actually had the advantage over Goliath. He saw something that nobody else could see. The Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by the outward appearance, The Lord looks at the heart, right? God sees strength where other people only see weakness, right? So let's flip it. We already told you all the ways that Goliath was strong and David was weak. Let's look at the rest of the story. Let's look at David and Goliath, not just through God's eyes, but you'll be able to see the truth in this when I show it to you, right? Goliath is slow and David is fast. How fast do you move when you're carrying 125 pounds of armor? How fast do you move? Right? You're not doing cartwheels. You're not doing backflips. You're not doing parkour, right? His stuff was so heavy. If you remember the story, Goliath had people carrying stuff. He had somebody carrying his shield for him. Goliath was slow, right? David was fast. He didn't have anything on him. He was small, so he's quick. God sees, wait a second, you're not seeing the whole story here, right? Let's look at the rest, right? Goliath's going to fight in the normal way, right? Big guy, big weapons, try to hit you with those weapons. Get close, start swinging, see who wins. That's the way they did it. You've seen Braveheart. No, you haven't. You're too young. All right. You heard about it. Look it up on Netflix. All right. But there's another part of this. Right? Goliath was going to be predictable. Goliath was going to do what people did to fight back then. David was going to do something that nobody expected, especially Goliath. Right? David was quick and he fought in an unusual manner. Let's go back to the text again. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David quickly ran out to meet him. Reaching into his shepherd's bag and taking out a stone, he hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in. That hurts, right? And Goliath stumbled and fell face down on the ground. That's not how people fought back then. That's not what Goliath was waiting for. David was so small, Goliath said he couldn't even really see him. And then when he said, "Did you bring out a dog to fight me?" Right? Goliath was fighting face to face, man to man, and David decided never to get close, never to engage, not to carry anything other than a sling and a stone. David didn't seem to have any weapons, right? Remember, David triumphed over the Philistine with only a sling and a stone. He had no sword. When Goliath looks at him, he's like, you're not even, this isn't even fair. This is ridiculous. Aren't you even going to try? Right? But this is crucial, and everything comes down to this. God gave David the battle, absolutely, right? But he didn't do it by turning David into something else. He did it by using who and what David already was, because he was that way because God made him that way for this particular purpose. David wasn't small and young and a shepherd and inexperienced on accident. God's what put him in that situation. Too often we look at ourselves and we look at others and we criticize them, or we see weakness, or we miss their strengths and we think, why can't I be? Why can't they be? Forgetting who made you that way. Right? God sees strength where everyone else sees weakness. And this story is crucial to me as a person. Because I came here to college with weakness. Like I talked about, I already had physical weakness, right? 6'4", 145, right? I was so skinny you could see my heart beating when my shirt was on, right? But I had other issues as well. When I was growing up and I was in school, I went to Christian schools, hardcore Christian schools, independent, fundamental Baptist Christian schools, like basement in the church Christian schools. You know what I'm talking about? The pastors, the principal, right? And the accountant, right? Your teacher plays the piano on Sundays, right? And when I was a kid, I was always in trouble for three things. I had three weaknesses. I couldn't sit still, I couldn't be quiet, and I wouldn't do what I was told. And by the way, when you don't do what you're told to do when you're at Christian school, you have a problem in your soul. You don't just have bad behavior, you're a bad person on the inside. And you're not just rejecting the human authority around you, you're rejecting the heavenly authority that they represent. That's heavy. That's a heavy burden when you're 8. Right? So I can't sit still. I can't be quiet. I can't do what I'm told. Teachers don't like me very much. They call me obnoxious, rebellious, inappropriate, immature, tell me I have no self-discipline and no self-control. And if I can't fix that, I'm going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river, right? Just Google it. Matt Foley, van down by the river, right? You just relax, okay? Sooner or later, the teachers give up on me. They send me to the principal's office. I'm in 3rd grade. I'm 8 years old. I'm in the basement of Pilgrim Baptist Christian School. We were for real. We were the pilgrims, right? We were going back to the day, right? Get sent to the principal's office. I'm 8. I'm in 3rd grade. He sits me down on his lap, which seems questionable now looking back on it. Keep it professional, right? And he tells me a story about 3 kinds of bad people, and I'm like, wow, this story doesn't even have good people in it. It's a Bible story about scoffers, mockers, and fools. That's heavy. You're 8. It's basically this. There's bad people in this world. There's really bad people in this world, and there's people who are so far gone they'll never come back to be good again. I was 8. Did I tell you I was 8? Right? George Eliot said, we begin to believe what the world believes about us. Right? And when everybody in my life is telling me that my biggest problems are my inability to sit still, be quiet, and do what I'm told, I start to believe that my biggest problems in life are my inability to sit still, be quiet, and do what I'm told. I'm not the only one who had trouble in school. Ken Robinson says many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not. Because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. The thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued, it was ignored or denied, or it was actually stigmatized. We tell people that the best thing about them, their brilliance, their talent, their creativity, is actually the worst thing about them. Doesn't just happen at school. At home, my parents had a nickname for me. They called me Motor Mouth. Right? In a constant attempt to remind me that my biggest problem in life was my inability to be quiet. I came to Judson College thinking that I had self-control problems, that I needed to learn how to that I needed to learn how to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. I needed to learn how to manage myself and stop being so impulsive. Right? And I was in Wilson Hall, right? And I was walking down the hallway one time, end of sophomore year, and I bumped into Elliot Anderson, resident director of Wilson Hall at the time. He said, "Hey, Dave, are you going to apply to be a resident assistant next year?" I said, "I will not be doing that because I am the reason you have resident assistants." And Elliot said something that changed my life forever. He said, "I don't see it that way, Dave." He said, "I see a lot of myself in you. And the things that most people see as negative, I see as leadership skills." And I applied to become a resident assistant. I learned leadership skills. And I started using who I was for good instead of evil, right? We transform lives when we find strength where everyone else finds weakness. This is not, oh, good, God can do that. We can't. We can. Right? And we transform lives because here's the thing. Tomorrow I'm flying to El Salvador. The next day I'm flying to the Dominican Republic. I've gotten to speak all over the world. I'm a professional speaker. I get paid to do 3 things. I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to. And I get paid to run my own business, not to do what anybody else tells me to do. Nobody approved this. Even my wife isn't into it, right? And I'm like, the pink pays the bills. And she's like, all right, just keep the checks coming, right? Every one of my weaknesses was a weakness. I'm not telling you people don't have weaknesses. But every one of my weaknesses was also a strength. And no one saw that. My parents didn't see it, my teachers didn't see it, my employers didn't see it, but Elliot saw it, and then I saw it. And once I saw it and I realized, wait a second, what if my biggest weaknesses are also my strengths? What if the worst things about me are the best thing about me? And that started a lifelong journey to show other people that their weaknesses are probably strengths, and the very things that they're ashamed of, the very things that they feel guilty about, the very things that they think are wrong with them, that they're trying to fix, that they're trying to develop in an effort to get better, are actually their best qualities. It's just that no one's been able to see it. In 2016, I did my first Ironman triathlon. Like I said, my wife didn't approve this. My wife doesn't approve of this in general, right? Like I was training for a triathlon. You wear the spandex stuff for the bike and stuff like that. I was going to do a training ride. I had my spandex shorts on. The shoes make you taller, right? And then you got the helmet. I had no shirt on. I was as fit as I've ever been in my entire life. My wife just started laughing, asked if she could take a picture. I'm like, this is the best I got. She's like, and it's hilarious. I got to put it on Facebook, right? We were going to a conference once, and the guy who was the band leader for this big Christian conference had ended up having an affair, and my wife was finding out online that he had an affair, and she looked disapprovingly at me. And I was like, I didn't have an affair. He had an affair. And she's like, well, you travel a lot. And I'm like, I'm at the Hampton Inn. They don't even have like a bar at the Hampton Inn. I was like, I met you in college. I don't know how to pick up girls, right? She's like, well, I'm not worried about you. Maybe it's them coming after you. I'm like, you locked this down 25 years ago. No one's come after it since. Like, there's no one's, I don't know what you think is going on out there, but this is not a trend, right? No one's into it, right? This is just for you forever, right? You got it, right? No one else wants it, right? But I did my first Ironman triathlon. It's I'm not trying to impress you, just clear what you need to know. 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, 26.2-mile run. They give you 17 hours to finish. If you don't finish in 17 hours, they don't say good try. They say you stink and try again. Yeah. I finished in 16 and a half hours, barely made it. But I was happy I finished. To put it in perspective, 16 and a half hours, there's an 83-year-old Catholic nun named Sister Madonna Booter who's done it in 16 hours and 30 minutes. Like me and her high-fiving at the end, right? But I finished. And when I finished, I had Facebook messages, text messages, and voicemail messages from people all over the world telling me how inspiring it was, how I'd motivated them to lose some weight, challenge their own limits, praising me and rewarding me for being very, very, very active, 16 and a half hours of nonstop physical activity. Praising me and rewarding me for being very, very, very active, which is interesting. Because for my entire life in school, I was very, very, very active. What do we call kids in school that are very, very, very active? We call them hyperactive. We pathologize it as ADHD. Then we give them medicine that fixes them and makes them better. Right? My whole life, I got criticized from well-intentioned people who loved me and cared about me. Right? But my whole life, I got criticized and punished for being very, very, very active. This is crucial. Then I got more active, and people said, wow, that's amazing, nice job. The strength was always there, they didn't see it. The strength was always there, I didn't see it. We transform lives when we find strength where everyone else sees weakness. Now, I'm giving you the spiritual background on this, but this isn't just a spiritual thing. Jimmy Kimmel's a late-night talk show host. He's a comedian, has his own television show. He was asked to host the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Obama was president. Black tie affair, lots of famous and successful people there. He seems to be getting really serious in the middle of the talk. He comes up to the podium. He says, I just want to thank Mr. Mills, my 10th grade history teacher, who told me I'd never amount to anything if I didn't stop screwing around. Mr. Mills, I'm about to high-five the President of the United States of America. Then he does, putting this woman in the most awkward picture of all time. And then he comes back to the podium, he says, eat it, Mills, right? Now, I'm not here to be down on teachers. Mr. Mills was just teaching him what his parents and his teachers, his employers had taught him. Mr. Mills was just doing what everybody else does, which is quickly and easily seeing the weakness and missing the strength. Because you see, Jimmy didn't get better by fixing his weakness. He went pro at screwing around. He went full-time at screwing around. He got more childish, more silly, more ridiculous, more immature. If you don't believe me or you haven't seen the show, I'll just give you one example. It's about to be Halloween, What Jimmy Kimmel wants you to do if you're a parent is after your kid goes to sleep, after they get all their candy on Halloween night, you hide it all. When they wake up the next morning and they say, "Can I have some candy?" you say no because your mom and I ate it all. When your kid goes nuts, you get out your camera, you record it, send it to Jimmy so he can humiliate your child on national television. Okay? Jimmy Kimmel didn't succeed because he fixed his weakness. He found the strength hiding inside the weakness and built the world around it. There's a guy named Thorkild Sohn living in Denmark. He had a son with autism. 2 of the symptoms of autism are hyperfocus and doing the same thing over and over again. Because that's not normal, we've decided it's wrong, and so we try to give people therapy to help fix that, right? But Thorkild Sohn went to work in software testing, and he noticed they needed their employees to do 2 really important things. He needed employees who could hyper-focus and do the same thing over and over again. So he started a company called Specialister, and it means the specialists in Danish. They only hire people with autism, and they only do software testing. And they've hired 50 people with autism, and they haven't changed the person, they've changed the place. They haven't changed who the person was, they changed where the person was, because Thorkild Sohn saw strength where everyone else saw weakness. And now he's a global advocate for neurodiversity. SAP, the global software company, is now looking for hundreds of people with autism to do software testing for their businesses all over the world because that seemingly obvious diagnosable disability is also a strength. And Thorkild Sohn didn't just transform his son's life, he transformed hundreds of people's lives, thousands of people's life, because he found strength where everyone else found weakness. So here's my challenge for you today. From E.E. Cummings. We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us, something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. I get to do these presentations all over the place. Sometimes I get to speak to students. Sometimes I get to speak to teachers, sometimes parents, sometimes entrepreneurs. And I was talking to a group of educators, and there was a lady there named Stacy, and she had a son who was 10 years old, and he had ADHD. And she took home my kids' book, Freak Factor for Kids, and she took it home to her son, Leo, and she gave it to him, and he read it, and he wrote me a note. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Rendall, for the book. It made me feel better about who I am." Because I was the first person who told Leo that deep inside of him something was valuable. The very thing, his ADHD, that he'd been told was the most worthless thing about him. That it wasn't worthless, that it was worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. And that's my challenge to you today. It's easy to point out weakness in yourself, in others, in the world around you. But the lesson we can learn from the Bible, from David and Goliath, from Samuel, and from the stories I've told you today, is that we transform lives when we find strength where everyone else sees weakness. Thank you very much.